Okay, so in the previous tutorial we made the general shape of the fuselage of the X-Wing, and so now we are going to continue by adding additional detail and looking at how to take existing geometry and create more subdivisions in order to have to be able to fine-tune the work that we're doing. And so one of the first things that we need to do, and it's part of the project that makes it the most kind of challenging to, it's one of the more challenging things to do well, is to shape the kind of rectilinear shape of the fuselage we've got to the actual shape of the body of this ship. And so the first thing we need to do is we need to be able to cut a line essentially about halfway through this entire side, right? So that we can pull this edge out a touch and we can push these corners in and not have the whole side come in as well. So to do that, we're going to use a tool called the knife tool. And the knife tool, or the line cut tool, I guess is what they call it now, is available down here, and it looks like a knife. So I'm going to click on that. We haven't talked about quick keys for any of these modeling tools yet. There are menus that have all of these tools available. If we go up to mesh, you'll see that there's this line cut, poly pen tool, bevel, extrude, inner extrude, etc., etc. And there's a bunch more in each of one of these options. And you'll notice that on the far side of the menu, if I hover over, like say one of these, there's this M tilde-Q. What that means is that you press the letter M, it opens up a menu, and then you press the letter Q to get to that particular tool. So in this case, if I want to use one of the cutting tools, which I don't want to use a line cut tool in the mode that I'm currently in, and we'll talk about why in a second, but for the cutting tools, I can say I hit the letter K, and this little menu pops up, and then there's J, K, and L. Plane cut, line cut, and loop path cut. What I'm going to want is the loop path cut tool, but I need to be in edges mode or points mode to do that. The other quick key that opens up a lot of the modeling tools, surprisingly enough, is the letter M. And if I hit that, you'll see that, oops, if I move the mouse at all, it disappears. You'll see that I have A, B, C, D, all the way through Z are different tools. And so you can kind of look through there and see the different possible tools that are in there. You'll also notice that edge cut, plane cut, line cut, and loop path cut are also available under the letter M, right? So I could either hit K, and then in this case I'm going to do L, or I could do M and then L. Either one will work, right? Again, Cinema4D, they like to give you many options for how to do things. So I'm going to go to edges mode, and you'll see that there's a selection already. So I'm going to hit the space bar so that I have my live selection tool. I'm going to deselect that by clicking off in space. And then I'm going to hit the letter M and then the letter L to get my line cut tool. And when I have my line cut tool, you'll see what this allows you to do. It's a really powerful tool. Wherever there's the edge that I'm hovering on, and then you'll see, like in this case, it's like a C shape, is where the cut will happen, right? And so you can see as I move along this edge, it changes. Sometimes you get in a place where where it's really hard to get things to work well. And this works well on really clean, simple geometry. As soon as you start pulling like extrusions out of the side and there's more complex things, the line cut tool doesn't always know where to go, and you lose the ability to use it in certain cases. And so the best option is to try and do this early and make sure that you get all the cuts done you need to get done, which sometimes you don't know, and it's just a process of learning the software. So to do this horizontal cut, what I'm going to do is I'm going to be up on the side here, and I really want to raise that up and look in my side view. And you'll see that it kind of zigzags around a little bit, but I want to make sure, sorry if there was noise there, but I want to kind of make sure that it does get somewhat close to halfway through. And there's a couple places where we'll make some modifications as the line is sort of zigzagging. But let's go ahead and we will cut that. Okay, so we've made this cut and we have this whole edge selected. Now, we want to pull this edge out a little bit, all the way across the entire length of the craft. We want it to come out just a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and make certain areas visible in here, because what we're going to want to do is we want this top edge here, which is hard to highlight, right? But this top edge here and this bottom edge here need to come in a little bit, and this one needs to come out a little bit or stay put, right? In this case, in the front of the ship, it needs to stay put. In the back of the ship, you can see it needs to come out a little bit. And so what we're going to do is we're going to use our live selection tool. And in this case, we have enough space. We might want to zoom in a little bit, but we have enough space that we can select these different edges. We want to make sure that we only select visible elements. So I'm going to turn that on. I'm going to deselect again, just in case I selected something on accident. I'm going to click once to select this, and I'm going to hold down Shift to select this other edge. And once I've selected those two edges, if I go into the front view and zoom in a little bit, I can hover over this red axis and I can pull these edges out. Now I also know that these top edges and bottom edges need to be pulled into the body of the ship, right? This blue line here, which is probably hard to see, should be here, and this blue line here should be there to fit those. And so those are the next things I'm going to change. So I'm going to go ahead and select these two edges. I'm going to come into my front view, and I might make the front view full screen just to make it a little easier to see what's going on. I'm going to hover over this, because I'm going to be moving this in both dimensions. I'm going to hover over this corner. I'm going to click and drag, and I'm going to fit this to that shape. Now I'm going to pop back into all four views, and I'm going to select these two edges. I'm going to hold down Shift to get that second one. I'm going to come back to my front view. And this is a little trickier because it's kind of, right, it comes up to here and then there's this other cut that should happen. And we'll try and deal with that in a little bit, but let's just go ahead and pull this back. And now you'll notice that from the front, it looks like from the front view, it looks like I missed something, right? And in some ways I did, but right now, I'm honestly not sure which corner I should go to. I think I'm going to go to this top corner, and then we can do another cut later and pull out this corner. So I'm going to put this here, and it may look like I've made a mistake because these other corners are sticking way out in front, but that's because they are, right, it's the way that this, right, it's these edges here where we're going to want to pull in to the top of this cockpit. Right, and so I'm going to go ahead and not use edges mode this time. I'm going to use polygon or points mode. So I'm going to go into points mode. And what I want to do is I want to select this point in order to snug this point into the body. And so if I uncheck only select visible elements, and I come over here and select this point, and then I can go ahead and pull these corners in to the top of the cockpit. Right? And as I go forward, right, the rest of this is also far too broad. And so with this view, these edges here are likely where I want that bend to happen, or they might actually be just a little bit further out. And it's honestly, it's really hard to say. But we're going to go ahead and do them all in one go, because that way we're moving them all the same amount. Whereas if we do individual movements, we'll probably end up with some wiggle. And so let's go ahead and we'll just select all of these edges and bring them in a little bit. So we're going to go to edges mode, and we're going to select, hold down Shift. And there's other tools that allow us to make these changes as well. But in this case, these, we've got enough space that this is really going to help us. So let's start by trying to pull these in this direction a little bit. All right, so we're going to narrow this down. I'm going to bring it in to about where I think it would be really useful to have a model of an X-Wing to look at right now, or a three-dimensional image, which I'm not going to worry about. We're going to get it, reasonably close and close enough for a tutorial, right? So you can see that this is already starting to take that shape on a little bit better. And so something I probably should have done, however, is I should have grabbed those bottom edges because it is pretty uniform. And you'll see, and so let's go ahead and undo that. And something else I want you to notice, even though it didn't impact me because I clamped these points here, I did because I still had only select visible elements turned off. I did select these edges down here. So let's turn that back on. Let's deselect everything and let's try this one more time. So I'm going to select this, this, and then I'm going to go ahead and rotate down below. I'm going to hold down Shift and continue to select these. Something to note, if you accidentally select, say I accidentally select this additional edge, in software like Photoshop or whatever, you would hold down Shift again to click and deselect it. That's not how it works in Cinema4D. You have to hold down the Control key, whether you're in Mac or Windows, and then click, and that will deselect something out of a group selection. Okay, so now that I've done that, now I'll go ahead and repeat this and I'll pull this in. And that's probably pretty good. You could always go online and look at a model of an X-Wing to make sure that we're doing a good job. And then there's something else here, right? It'd be nice if we could get the whole cockpit to kind of be its own thing, right? The seam here between these two polygon surfaces, it'd be great if it was down here, because that just makes our lives a lot easier when we go to continue modeling this. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a tool called Loop Selection. It's down here in this row of tools just above the modeling tools. If I click on Loop Selection, and I'm going to go ahead and just click off in space so I'm not selecting anything. And then if I hover over an edge, I can actually select the entire edge. And sometimes it'll loop all the way around the geometry like this one's doing. And other times you get exactly what you want. So I'm going to do a loop selection and select this. And then all I want to do is just move it this direction a little bit. So I'm going to hit the letter E on the keyboard to get the move tool. I'm just going to pull this down until it is set here. And then something else that's going on here is now it's a little bit fatter than it should be on this corner. So I'm going to go ahead and maybe just pull it in just a hair so that it flows a little bit better. Oh, and I don't know what I just did. Uh-oh. There we go. I went spazzy on it. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and rotate around this view and just see what happens. Now the tip at this point is a little bit too narrow. I brought these front edges in too much, but that's something we can adjust pretty easily. So let's go ahead and look at the front of this nose cone and see where we're at. So I'm going to move my view. Right, it looks good from the side and probably good from the top. But these 2 points it just makes it too narrow. They really need to come out to the edges of this here or a little bit further out. And so all I'm going to do is I'm going to go into points mode and I'm going to press the space bar. Now if I press the space bar now, it jumps me back to loop selection. So I'm actually going to have to go up and use the live selection tool. And I have only select visible elements turned on, which is good. I'm going to click once to get rid of that. I'm going to zoom in. I'm going to select this point. I'm going to hold down Shift, select this point, and then I'm just going to pull these out a little bit to make the nose a little bit more blunt. Right? And the other thing I can do is these two edges that are way out here, I might actually want to select this point and even though it's not necessarily fully accurate, I might want to bring that in a touch because it just seemed a little bit excessive. Okay, so we're getting a little bit further. You can see that this modeling method does take a significant amount of time. And so that's something just to be aware of. Now, the other thing we need to do is we need to deal with some of this detail in the nose cone. especially where there's this ridge here. And we'll do a simple job of that because, again, we're going to just continue hacking away at this. And there's a few other things that I'd like to cover. But what we're going to start with is, let's go ahead and add a little more detail to the nose cone so it's a bit more rounded. And then we will work on extruding the wings and also fixing any other major issues, like in here where, you know, this should actually drop down a bit and then shoot over and pop back up. We're going to go ahead and fix that as well. All right, so for the nose cone, let's go ahead and come to this side view. We're going to go to edges mode, and we're going to hit either M or K and then the letter L. And we're going to make a couple more loop cuts, right? And really, we could say we probably need, I'm going to say we probably need 2 more loop cuts. So I'm going to make one, I'm going to come down here, and I'm going to make a second one. And then the nice thing is that by default, the edges that we just loop cut are selected. And really what we need to do is we need to switch over and go into our points mode. And we don't need to do any adjustment to this midpoint really right now. What we need to do is we need to adjust this point and this point so it's a little bit more rounded. So I'm going to select those two. I'm going to hit the letter T to do scaling, and I'm just going to scale them away from each other a little bit. All right, and something else I just noticed that I should have done is you notice how I pulled those up, but the center point is still low. So I'm going to undo that. What I really need to do is go to my live selection, uncheck only select visible elements, come into my side view, click once up there and hold down shift and click here, and then use the scale tool so that I'm pulling those center points up at the same time that I'm pulling up the edge points. And now I'm going to go back to, I'm going to hit space to go back to my live selection. I'm going to select the points up here. I'm going to hold down shift, select the points down here, hit the letter T to go to scale, and I'm going to do the same thing, right, until this is a little bit more rounded. And then down here, this bottom point is a little bit further out than I would like it to be. So I'm going to go ahead, and the top one is in decent shape where it is. I'm going to go ahead and select this point, which actually selects that center point too. And I'm just going to snug that up just a touch. Now that I've done that, what I want to do is I want to look for where's the next point where a major change in geometry happens. And that happens right here where this cut is. And this cut's a little bit problematic. And we're not going to fully deal with it right now. But we're going to go ahead and at least make the first couple changes to adjust that. And so I'm going to hit the letter K and then L, and I'm going to make a cut. I'm going to make 2 cuts that are really close together, but not so close that I can't select some of the points without selecting the others. And so I'm going to go ahead and make a cut here. And before I make a second cut, I'm going to go back to my live selection tool. I'm going to select the point on top of this because this is where it drops down. I'm going to zoom in and I'm going to pull this down. And when I do that, you'll see that this aligns correctly, but now this is out of whack. So now I'm going to use my cut tool again by hitting L and K. And I'm going to put, and it doesn't really matter where this cut is right now. I'm going to go ahead and cut it there. I'm going to hit space. I can't really select this point very easily, so I'm going to deselect everything by clicking off in space. Click here, pull this point up, and then I'm going to go to the loop selection mode. So I'm going to click on loop selection. I'm going to hover over this line. I'm going to select it, which will select all the points around that edge. I'm going to hit the letter E to move it, and I'm just going to pull this over until it's more or less straight in line with this other edge. All right, and so if I rotate the view up here, you can see that now I've got that cut that comes down from the top. Now the areas where that cut isn't happening, right, is here, and that's because I need another cut over here because this thing scoops down before it drops off, before this edge gets pushed in. So I'm going to go ahead and hit hit K and hit L again. I'm going to come over here and hover over this bottom edge, make a cut, hit the space bar, switch back to live selection, which is available down here as well. I'm going to select these points. I'm going to nudge them in a little. Oops. Did I make 2 cuts? Or did I cut really close to that edge? Hold on a second. Let me undo that. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and say K and then L. Cut. I'm going to hit space. I'm going to select this. And I'm going to nudge this in, and I'm going to say, why am I selecting points that are not moving? Maybe they are, and I'm just blind. Okay, well, I'm going to pretend that that's exactly what I wanted to have happen. And so now that I've moved these in, I'm going to see if I can snug them in a bit more. I don't know why this point is not moving at all, but it seems like that's the case. Oh, okay. So when I did this, I started trying to move these points, and they're not moving anywhere. And this is because I accidentally hit the wrong key when I started to do this step. So I'm going to undo all of those motions I just did until this gets back down on here. What I did is I hit the letter L on the keyboard before I hit the letter K. And the issue there is that the letter L toggles this button on and off. And what that is what this does is it allows you to move the axis of rotation separate from the object. So if you want an object, you have, say, a cylinder and you want it to rotate from one end instead of rotating from the middle, you can click on this to enable axis. You move the axis over to the end of the cylinder, you uncheck enable axis, and then when you go to rotate it, it'll rotate from the end of the cylinder rather than the middle. So this causes people problems all the time. So please remember, if you accidentally hit L and suddenly your axes are moving but nothing is happening, it's because this enable axis button is on. So you can just quickly look over here. If it's highlighted in blue, you know what mistake you made. It can be so frustrating. Okay, so I'm going to hit K, and no, I don't need to cut it again. I'm still here. So I'm going to hit the space bar. I'm going to hit the letter E to move it. And so now those points should move like they're supposed to. So I'm going to pull these up a little bit. I've also noticed that, right, these points down here are a little off too, so I'm going to go ahead and nudge them up a touch too while I have the opportunity. And then I'm going to hit the letter K and the letter L. I'm going to come over here, and again, I'm going to create a set of points. I'm going to hit space. I'm going to select those points, and I'm going to pull this down significantly, maybe down to the middle of this dark line, and I might go ahead and nudge these down a touch too. And then now that I've got this, I need to move all of these points over so that they're really close to this other set of points. So I'm going to go ahead and do the loop selection. I'm going to hover over this edge. I'm going to make sure that, you know, if I go over this point, it's only going to select that point. And I just have to make sure that, you know, when you can kind of see which line you're on by what's highlighting in white. And so I'm going to select these. I'm going to hit the letter E to move this. And I'm going to go ahead and pull these over. I'm not leaving them perfectly straight. I'm leaving them a little bit off. And so if I rotate this view now up here, you can see that I'm starting to get, right, the cut down here, and I'm getting the cut up here as well. I don't really have that cut in here, and I need to add this additional geometry to make that a smooth transition. But that's something that you can do after the tutorial. It's something that takes so much time, but you already know the process. You know, by watching what I've done here, you could replicate that and continue to work on the detail in the nose of this object. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead, and we've done that. So let's go ahead and move. I'm going to zoom out a bit. I'm going to zoom in over here. And we're going to go ahead and fix this, and then that will be the end of this tutorial. And we'll we'll pull the wings out in the next part. So let's go ahead and say, hit the letter K and the letter L. And I know that one of the places I want an edge is here. The another place that I want an edge is where this turns into this flat edge. So I'm going to go there. Another place that I'm going to want the edge to be is, and I'm not quite sure where R2's little body space ends, but you can see there's a lot more mass happening here, which is probably those engines. So I might put another edge here, just so that all of this can go nicely. Okay, and so now that I've created all of those points, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my live selection tool, and I'm going to go ahead, and this point only needs like a, maybe a minor adjustment. This point up here actually, is, if I deselect, is a little bit high, right? I want that to be a little flatter. And I probably honestly want to scoot this whole thing up to this seam here, which I'll do in a little bit. But first, let's go ahead, since we're already doing this live selection, let's go ahead and with this, there's a couple points close by, so I'm going to click and drag to make sure I grab all of those and then drag them down. And there may be a little cleanup I'm going to need to do here, but it's hard to say. And so now the other thing is I'm going to select this point and probably this point, just so that these edges come down and don't get too out of whack with how they're set up. So now I've got this edge, and I might pull this down just a touch more so that it's straight across there. And I'm going to look at this view and probably realize that I've made a terrible mistake. I'm going to select those 2 points now, and I'm going to pull them down. And once I have all of that set, I'm going to go ahead and leave it that way, because I don't know if this angles up steeply to the body, or and that engine is just in the way, or if it goes flat further back. And so what I might do is actually pull up an image or several images from the internet to see what that part of the body actually looks like. All right, so now I've smushed that part in. You can start to really see the shape of this thing. There's a couple places where I know something's a little bit off, like here where this should really taper in a little bit more. Or it may be that what I really need is one more cut for the edge of the cabin to be in the right place, so that this tapers together just a little bit more. But at this point, I think this is another good spot for us to save the work that we've done and take a break.